when does a boy become a man? It's when he has the ability to harness his God-given skills, abilities, talents, and DNA, his biological hardwiring, and produce effective outcomes for himself and the people that he cares about. And we are designed to be that of protectors, providers, and presiders. And that's what makes a male a man. When a man steps up that way, he is unstoppable, and the people around him love and respect him the way I think men ought to be working towards that love and respect from others.
Remember, adversity is your advantage.
Hey friends, cannot wait for you to check out this new episode of the CEO Show podcast where I interview my dude, Ryan Michler. Now, Ryan is a father. He's a successful entrepreneur who launched an organization called Order of Man. So if you want to learn about leadership, if you want to learn how to protect, provide, and preside over your family and for your team, you got to check out this episode. Hey friends, welcome back to another amazing episode of the CEO Show where I teach leadership, promote capitalism, defend free speech. I want to welcome my guest, Ryan Michler, to the show. Ryan, welcome to the CEO Show podcast.
What's up, brother? I've been looking forward to this one, man. So glad to be joining you today.
Yeah, man. Holy smokes. Kindred spirits. Been following your content for a long period of time. To set the tone for our audience, we are both involved with our mutual friend, my business partner, Bedros Keuilian, who launched the Squire program, teaching young boys how to be better leaders, there's a huge void in leadership and masculinity. So, you were also involved in that program as well. So that's how the connection came to be. And before we get any further started, I just want to thank you for being on, but also too for your body of work. Your content is absolutely amazing. Teaching men how to be better men is just absolutely needed in the world right now, especially with all the craziness we've seen over the last handful of years. So I want to start there.
Yeah, I think I hit it at the, first of all, thank you for having me on, and Bedros is amazing. And I think with what we've done with our organization, which is coming up on our 10-year anniversary in March of next year, I think we hit the market at what you might say is both the right and the wrong time. The wrong time in that our society and culture is going the absolute wrong way. The right time in that I got out ahead of the curve. Luckily, fortunately, got out ahead of the curve a little bit. And I think the work that we're doing, especially like you had mentioned with our young men, is needed today, almost 10 years later now, more than it was when I started this little movement in 2015.
Heck yeah. Well, hats off. A lot to go through in terms of masculinity, leadership, freedom, sovereignty. I do want to give you the space. You talked about your organization, Order of Man. So really to give you the space to be able to paint the picture for our audience, the backstory, the mission, why you created this incredible community and mission.
Yeah, Order of Man, like I said, was a idea that I had off the back of another podcast I was doing in 2014 into early 2015. I was doing some financial planning at the time, had a very successful financial planning practice that I had built over a decade, and realized that I loved podcasting. I had another podcast most people don't know called Wealth Anatomy, and it was geared towards helping my clients and prospects, namely medical professionals, with their financial services. I realized really, really quickly I love the medium of podcasting, but I was a little bit burned out, a little bit tired on that subject and that topic. So I pivoted into something that I would have found useful for me, which was, how do I hear from entrepreneurs and CEOs and warriors and scholars and athletes and entertainers, just the men at the pinnacle of their game, so that I could learn how to be a better father, husband, leader in my community, owner of my businesses. And man, it took off really quickly. The first podcast I ever did, I think if I remember correctly, had more downloads the first podcast than the entirety of the work that I had done with Wealth Anatomy. And so I knew pretty quickly I was onto something. I don't think that was smart. I just think it was fortunate. I kind of stumbled into it and realized very quickly that our motto of protect, provide, preside is something that resonates with a lot of men, and something that seems to be, to put it mildly, on the decline. But if I'm being real about it, it is continually undermined, eroded, and actively worked against. So I hope that in some way our movement is empowering men to be who they need to be and who they have a desire to be, and also thwarting the attacks and the assault of the enemy. And I do look at it that way.
Yeah, well, kindred spirits. I mean, I could not agree with you more. One of your frameworks, which you just hit, actually, is the pillars of masculinity being protect, provide, and preside. So, Ryan, would love for you to break those down. I also, aside from breaking those down, before you actually do that, I'm curious, and there's clearly attack on this. Where is this coming from? Why are these, really bad ideas, the softening of Western society, the softening of strong leadership, the softening of strong men? Where is this attack coming from? Let's start there, and then I want you to break down your pillars.
There are layers to the attack and the assault that we see on manliness and masculinity. And by the way, I think those are two different things, and we might get into that. But there are layers to this. And on the front lines are what I call the useful idiots. And I don't know who dubbed that term. Maybe you do, but that's a term that was dubbed when it comes to people who are politically expedient. They're helpful for a political ideology or an agenda, mostly ignorant people that don't really understand history, aren't real intelligent necessarily, but they're good pawns in the game of power. And that's the first layer, is these useful idiots. These are people who they have this very leftist ideology, the ideology that men and women are somehow it's you can conflate the two, that there's no differentiating factor other than some sort of social conditioning between man and woman. That they're just not real bright people, and they're easily exploited, they're easily manipulated. And so this, at a deeper level, the additional layer comes from the powers that be, those individuals who want to maintain control, for the obvious desire of power and control and authority. And we see this at four main levels. We see this obviously in the government is one. We see in the halls of academia, whether we're talking about government institutions like your elementary and high school education, and also post-secondary education. We even see it in the medical community. Things like the American Psychological Association, or however many associations with legitimate, credible doctors. Credible, I use loosely, who are undermining sex, for example, and gender. And then you also see this in entertainment, through the movies, through Hollywood, through the music that we consume and listen to. Again, it's useful idiots, and it's those powers that be that want to control the useful idiots in order to influence the way we culturally and societally look at what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman, and why the family unit is so important.
Yeah, I mean, could not agree with you more. It's interesting. I heard this quote by a famous comedian, and I'll leave his name off, but I think it's absolutely spot on. Our society these days is proud of what we should be embarrassed by, and we're embarrassed by what we should be proud. And that's an
Mm.
overarching terminology. But when I look at the roles of young men, young boys in leadership, it seems to be we've lost our way. And obviously, you've just laid down the foundation of where these attacks are coming from. I want to dive in a little bit more, and I do have a note for a follow-up question about male, the difference between a male and a man. We'll get into that, but let's dive deep on protect, provide, preside. These are your three pillars of masculinity. Can you break these down, and then why are they essential for men?
Well, you said one thing, and I don't think you meant it this way. You said these are your pillars. They're not my pillars. They are the pillars. So I've had people ask me over the past decade, what makes you the authority? What makes you feel like you have the right to tell other men what it means to be a man? And it's not me. I've identified what it is, but I haven't created what it is. That comes from our creator, God. And if you look at all of culture, all of history, all of the people throughout time and history, you can see that there's some very real and striking similarities between the way that men show up in just about every culture throughout all of human history show up. And we are designed to be that of protectors, providers, and presiders. There's a great book called Manhood in the Making by David Gilmour, and he has his framework, and he studied cultures and tribes throughout human history and identified correctly protect and provide. I think incorrectly, his third component is to procreate. I don't necessarily agree with that. I know plenty of people who I would consider men who don't have children, whether it's a medical inability to do so, or a decision. I would still call them men. But I think preside, which is synonymous with leadership, would fill that third tier of what it means to be a man. So, a lot of people will ask, well, when does a boy become a man? It's when he has the ability to harness his God-given skills, abilities, talents, and DNA, his biological hardwiring, and produce effective outcomes for himself and the people that he cares about. And the way that we as men do that is we protect our loved ones. We provide for, not just physically, not just the financial resources, but one thing I'm learning a lot, even at age 43, is how do I provide emotional stability for the woman that I'm dating, for my children, for the people who rely on me to show up in a powerful way. I wish I could say I always had that one locked down. I haven't. I've been emotionally volatile. I've resorted to even outburst. I got into alcohol abuse, which obviously diminished my ability to provide that emotional and mental stability that a man is required to provide. And then that third tier, like I said earlier, is the preside component, which is synonymous with leadership. It's our job to be bold and courageous and assertive and take risks. And this isn't my definition of it. We are biologically hardwired through the hormones that are coursing through our veins and the way that we show up. When a man steps into those roles fully and effectively, and maybe even if he's on the road to, he, in my experience, will have a lot more fulfilling life. The people in his life, including his woman and his kids and his clients and coworkers and colleagues, will be more free to pursue the things that are interesting to them. And they will always look to him as somebody who can lead them to a place they could not have imagined going on their own. When a man steps up that way, he is unstoppable, and the people around him love and respect him the way I think men ought to be working towards that love and respect from others.
Amen. Amen. And it's interesting. Sometimes the other narrative is like, just because, we talk about the biological needs and deliverables that a man needs to be able to bring forth to his community, to his family. Sometimes there's, this counter argument. It's like, oh, are you diminishing females? It's like, no, it's like we should be celebrated in their own right as well, but there's a difference, right? And we need to be able to celebrate each differences and really be able to align and work as a team, which is really how, and from my view, God has created, our humanity. So definitely strongly agree with you there. I want to dig into something you said earlier, which I know just highlighted the differences between a male and a man. And you talked about your abuse with alcohol. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I know from, studying and researching you, neither of us had a good male father figure, a blueprint. In fact, I can speak for myself, but from what I understand about you, Ryan, you very similar story. I had a blueprint of what I did not want to follow: a drug addict, addicted to alcohol and gambling, etc. Not a strong man, not someone who protected, provided, and presided. The exact opposite of that. So for me, while I didn't have that blueprint, it also inspired me to say, you know what, that's okay. If it has to be, it's up to me. Even though I didn't have this blueprint, I know what not to do. I'm going to now seek on what I should do, which is protect, provide, preside. So going in using that framework and, drilling back into the difference between a male and a man, how would you define that? And then really give our, audience some action steps on how to be a better man, not just a male.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to what you said, I wish I would have been that aware of the fact that I didn't have great role models in my life, and I would have been aware enough to say this is an example of what not to be. I wasn't that. In fact, I was thinking about that over the past couple of weeks. A lot of the destructive habits that I've engaged in over a period of time in my life were subconscious. I wasn't consciously, yes, I was consciously making those decisions, but the reasons I was making those decisions was at a subconscious level. So I don't want to say that I'm not responsible for it because it was subconscious. I am responsible for my decisions, but the reason I chose to engage in those behaviors or those patterns is because subconsciously that's what I saw growing up. And that's what I learned. That's a reason. That's not an excuse. And there's a difference between the two. An excuse is, well, my dad was an asshole, so that's why I am, period. A reason, on the other hand, was, hey, my dad was a drunk. He didn't show up. He was out of the picture. And so that's what I was exposed to when I was a kid. And so I'm going to have to work extra hard relative to a young man who grew up with somebody who was a rock and stable and secure and present. It's not an excuse not to perform. It's just a reason you need to be aware of so you can perform in spite of past circumstances.
I mean, smoking like a true man. And there's an adage that I always look at. It might not be your fault, but it's still your responsibility. So in this example that you just laid out, which is very, very common, no, if you're in that particular situation, it's not your fault you didn't have a blueprint. It's not your fault you didn't have a strong man to give you that, guidance, but it is still your responsibility to be a better man and learn how to do that. Definitely agree and want to reiterate that point from my lens.
Yeah. Well, to go back to what you were saying about the difference between being a male and being a man, or even the difference between masculinity and manliness, I think it's really important we make this distinction. Every time I bring this up, I have a group of people who will say, oh, it's just semantics. It doesn't matter. No, it really does matter. Because there's a group of people who believe that just being a man is a sense of hardware and hardwiring. And I think it's more than that. Take, for example, my three sons. I've got four children, three boys and one girl. My boys are 16, 13, and 8 years old. With the exception of the 16-year-old, not many people in their lives expect them to be men. My 16-year-old, he's a young man. We expect more of him. My 13-year-old still expects some, but not as much. My 8-year-old, I don't expect him to show up as a man, obviously.
Yeah, he's a boy.
So if it were just, yeah, he's a boy. If it was just a matter of anatomy, then we would call all of them men. But I don't call my 8-year-old a man. Society doesn't even expect him to be. And so when he hits his sister or tries to punch me in the nuts because he's mad, or any number of things that he might do, it's it's not allowable, it's not acceptable, but it's understandable because we don't hold him to the standard of a man. But then we also have phrases like, "Oh, that's a man. There's a man's man. That's a manly guy right there." And that's because we all inherently recognize that there's some differentiating factor between some Joe Schmo who just shows up and some guy like you and other people who don't just show up, they are present. They are physically capable. They are ready for whatever situation they may be presented with. And so the differentiating factor between being a man and being a boy or a male, or masculinity and manliness, is to take our biological hardwiring. It's our DNA, it's our physical size, it's the hormones coursing through our bodies, taking that and harnessing that for productive outcomes for ourselves and other people. And that's what makes a male a man. It has nothing to do with age. That's why when my 16-year-old son shows up and does service work or helps a friend move when he doesn't need to, we would say that's manly behavior, maybe even more manly than the 30-year-old who's trapped in mommy and daddy's basement, jacking off and watching porn and playing video games. That's not manly behavior, but he's twice as old as my son. So really it has nothing to do with age and more to do with our behavior and how we show up.
Amen. The simple framework that I use, Ryan, to very easily delineate between a boy and a man is a man produces more than he consumes, and he supports his community or his exterior because of that. Where a boy consumes more than he produces, and that's just a natural evolution. But it doesn't. It's not dependent on age. To your point, it's the level of when you can produce more than you consume, you can add value to your family, to your community. And for my framework, just being very line in the sand, that's what I constitute. When a boy becomes a man.
Why I like that framework is because it doesn't mean that men don't consume. We do. We're in a consumptive society. We have resources that we have that we're in need of. We have desires, right? Physical, mental, emotional desires. And I think there's an opposite end of the spectrum that says men can't have anything. Like we're supposed to be the sacrificial lamb. Like we're supposed to die on the altar of every issue and every problem out there. And I don't think that's the case either. I have needs, I have dreams, I have desires. Some of them are selfish, and I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. Some of them are selfless, but I am allowed to have those because I produce the environment that allows me to have those. So a lot of people, and I know you're big into capitalism and we can talk about the economics of this, but a lot of people really, it seems to be growing and it goes in ebbs and flows, have this disdain for capitalism. It's basically comes down to a misunderstanding of what capitalism actually is. But at its root, it's just the fundamental block, I'll say, of capitalism is voluntary exchange. If I have this pen, for example, and you need a pen, then you're going to need to pay me something, whether that's some sort of monetary contribution or trade or exchange or skill set or service. And what's interesting about capitalism is that when I want to get rid of this pen, but you want it, we both walk away thinking we got the better end of the deal. because if we didn't, the transaction wouldn't happen. So let's say I'm going to sell you this pen for $1. You believe that this pen is worth more than the dollar you gave me. And I believe that the dollar you gave me is worth more than the pen I gave you. It's a beautiful way to create win-win situations based on our own individual needs and desires. My desires are different than yours. So the reason I like your framework, to go back to what I was saying, is that we are allowed to consume. We just need to understand that in order to create that consumptive environment or achieve our desires, we need to actually add value. We need to produce more in order to pay for the consumption that we have.
Yes, sir, my friends. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching this right now, I just really want you to take a step back and really lean in. This is gold here, my friends. So Ryan, appreciate your perspective. Now, transitioning, my core value is actually freedom. The essence of this show is to teach leadership, promote capitalism, defend free speech. If you break it down, I believe these are three things that are inherently needed for human prosperity, and they're anchored in freedom. And I know for studying you, freedom is also a value that you hold. So kind of in the reins of, and we're going to talk a little bit about the free markets here in a second, but still keeping on the top of masculinity, how does personal freedom, from your perspective, relate to masculinity, and what steps can men take to reclaim some freedom in their lives?
Well, we live in an era where we are the beneficiaries and the recipients of the hard work and sacrifice that hundreds of thousands of millions of people before us have secured for us. And we've become very soft, we've become very complacent, and we even say things like, "Oh, it's my right." It's only your right because somebody else either fought for it or preserved it for you. I think there's a misconception, especially with our younger population, who believe that you're just inherently allowed to do X, Y, and Z. And while you might think you are, there's forces at work against you that we need to actively combat in order to maintain our freedom, or the term that I often use is sovereignty. So whenever we talk about rights, which I think people talk about in the context of freedom, we also need to talk about responsibility. And that's the half that so many people forget and they miss, and they think that if their rights are being infringed upon, that, that person needs to suffer. No, you need to suffer because you need to fight for what you have, for what you want. And it's pervasive where people just think, well, I have a right, I can do this. Yeah, but what about your responsibility? Oh, I don't have to do anything. It's already there. Well, somebody already paid it. And unless you're willing to pay it now and moving forward, you're either not going to enjoy the freedoms you desire, or you're going to put that on the backs of your children and grandchildren. And that's certainly not something I'm interested in doing.
Yeah, no, sir. It's interesting. The freedom and responsibility are incredibly intertwined. So, from that perspective, I could not agree with you more. And that's, Jocko Willink talks about discipline equals freedom. But also freedom. I just spoke at Bedros Keuilian's event, BK Live, in September, and I used the tagline that freedom equals responsibility, and that's really just the point here. Ryan, moving on to speaking of freedom in terms of the free markets and reading, it's interesting. On one of my leadership manifestos, it was one of the things that I see is like the rise of entitlement, and then the rise of just really probably good intention, but bad ideas, and socialism and communist ideas specifically pushed out in the media and then to university and younger students. In fact, I was reading Valuetainment, who Patrick Bet-David with his company, and he did a research, and there's, out of the graduating college students at university, a third, like literally 35% nearly, of the students surveyed have favorable ideas on not only socialism, but communism, which is insanity to me. Because if you look at, the country that we were both raised in, which has many problems, but, I'm super grateful to be here. The economic system of free market capitalism has made this particular nation the biggest superpower the world has ever known. The economic system of capitalism has risen the most people out of poverty. And to your point, in your words, it's a voluntary exchange versus socialism or communism at the highest degrees is a mandatory exchange. And this goes back to freedom and sovereignty. So I'm curious, as you laid out on one of your, pieces of content, free markets are the economic answer. And I just agree with you so much here. If you could unpack that and explain your perspective around this.
Yeah, I think the 8+ billion people on the planet collectively can decide what is valuable and what isn't better than a small group of individuals that might not have our best interest at heart. I mean, that's the root of it. You know, if we get one person to make a decision on behalf of everybody, he's probably going to get some of that right. But if we collectively bargain or collaborate or work together or compile our ideas on what is valuable, we'll probably come up with a pretty good average solution. So again, to go back to this pen, collectively 8 billion people are determining the value of this pen. It's not one person. Because to one person, this pen could be worth $10,000 if they need to sign a $1 million deal and this is the only pen available. To the other person who has no need for this is worthless. But 8 billion people have decided this pen's worth $1 on average, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little less, depending on the quality of it. And I think that is the most powerful thing, is that there isn't one person or one governmental agency deciding what I think is valuable. And I talk with this all the time about, guys, is the idea of value. A lot of the times, and I think this gets pushed a little bit through the social media lens of like, know your worth, and I don't care what anybody else thinks of me. The only person that gets to decide what is valuable is the person consuming the product. That's it. I have a product, you have a product, selling pens, selling cups, selling computers. It's not the organization that gets to that's selling it that gets to determine the value. It's the person consuming it, because they can decide, well, I'm just not interested for that price. So I think we really, really need to latch onto this. But this goes back to what you were saying a minute ago, about these people who mean well. These are the useful idiots I'm talking about. The utopian society where everybody's wealthy and everybody's prosperous and there's no crime and there's no illness and there's no disease and there's no poverty. That sounds pretty good. It really does, if you look at it on the surface level. But in order to achieve that, at what cost does that come? Well, that means there's no innovation, there's no growth, there's no expansion, there's no chasing anything that's meaningful and significant. The half of the population needs to live in an environment where that they're less than capable of living in, because they have to reduce their economic prosperity. It's a horrible, horrible situation. And if you look at it throughout human history, it's a communism and socialism have contributed to more deaths, more despair, more disease, more famine, more violence, more contention than any other economic system in human history. So the only people who don't believe in capitalism are dumb, or they're evil. They're bad actors and they're actively working against you. The problem is that so many people conflate things like crony capitalism with actual free markets. And that's different. Now you're starting again, you're getting the government involved and you're trying to control prices and wages, and you're trying to manipulate the game to determine some predetermined outcome. The outcome should not be predetermined. In a capitalistic society, the starting point should be predetermined. And I'll acknowledge that throughout human history, we've all started at different points. Some have been perpetuated through racism and economic manipulation, and others is just our immutable characteristics. You know, I was born wealthy and this person was born in poverty. This person was born to a loving household and this person was born into a broken home. It's not going to be easy to create a level playing field, but we ought to work on creating the level playing field, the rules, and then let the game ensue and just see where it goes without interjection or involvement.
Yeah, amen. And this is a message that I'm just super passionate about, Ryan. I couldn't agree with you more. Me being a franchisor, supporting small business, running Fit Body Boot Camp. We have hundreds of locations throughout, North America. And my mission, my goal is to be able to support our small businesses so they can have a environment where the free market, reigns. And to your point, this is always what I always say in the boardroom when we're talking about a marketing idea strategy. We don't get to decide. The market gets to decide. And that's the value of free market capitalism. One thing that you talked a little bit about was government. And certainly government's needed. But from my perspective, very, very limited, because what happens is when government gets too big, it starts poking around and then creating restrictions, and really chaos ensues and challenge ensues. One of my pillars is freedom of thought and freedom of expression, which is the First Amendment, free speech. And in the last, it's probably been going on for a while, but Ryan, from my perspective, ever since 2020, for the reasons, listed, I don't even want to say the word because of, fear of YouTube, censoring it or diminishing the particular, episode, but it's clearly under attack. And there's been a rise of censorship, which to me threatens freedom of expression, freedom of speech. It also threatens free market capitalism, and the economic prosperity that we've been a part of that needs to continue. So from your lens, why is freedom of expression important, really, which is the First Amendment? And then how does it help both men and women in our society having the freedom of expression?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of free expression is that it brings to light ideas, and some ideas are good and some ideas are bad. And through freedom of expression and us being able to share and articulate and act on ideas, we collectively can decide, well, that was a good idea and that was a bad idea. I've had so many ideas, and I know you have when it comes to business, and some have done very, very well financially for me. And other ideas I've lost my shirt on, they were bad ideas and they deserved I deserve the consequences of those bad ideas because it helps me get feedback so I can make better ideas moving forward. I just watched over the weekend Elon Musk capture the booster rockets out of midair, grabbed it with what is it called, like Megazilla or something like that is the term, the tower that actually captured the capsule. That is a free
Unbelievable,
market
man.
idea. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And what's interesting about that is and I don't know all the specifics, but I've been looking a little bit into it. He's trying to secure an opportunity to launch rockets off of a Air Force base, if I understand, in California. And there's some governing agency or board or advisors that have determined that he is not going to be allowed to do that. And their primary reason is because they don't like his political positions. And that's not hyperbole. That's actually what they've said in the reason they denied his request to launch rockets off of this base in California. This is the problem. When you hinder people's free speech, you're trampling the opportunity for ideas that are revolutionary. Whether you think highly or low of Elon Musk and his political position, I don't think that we can deny that the man is a genius. He's solving problems that have never been solved, never been addressed. He's playing at a level that most of us aren't even capable of comprehending. And we're going to stifle a guy like that because he happens to like Donald Trump. Now, I do too, but it really doesn't matter. What matters is that he has good ideas that advance technology, that advance humanity, that put people in better positions. With these hurricanes that were in the South over the past several weeks now, for him to bring a product like Starlink online and allow literally hundreds of thousands of people have access to communication that was completely wiped out during the hurricane. And we're going to tell him that he's a bad guy because he's trying to make money, or he's trying to be political, or he has a political perspective. It's ludicrous. Look, the problem, I get it, is that when we give everybody a platform, and I've been the recipient of this, is that you're going to hear some bad stuff. You're going to hear some things you don't like. You're going to be offended. A lot of it is going to be wrong. Some of the stuff, even directed at you on a personal level, is going to be vile and nasty and completely false. And yet, it's the price that we have to pay in order to bring good ideas to the market, to society, that are going to generally advance. It's just the cost of free exchange, good ideas.
And there's no utopian society. I mean, to our point earlier, I mean, Elon Musk, from my perspective, he is my hero. If I could talk to one person, both dead or alive, throughout the entire, history of human civilization, it's Elon Musk. His visionary work. He's a humanitarian to the core. His ideas, I mean, certainly not all of his ideas have worked out, right? But the
Of
absolutely
course.
incredible value to humanity he's been able to provide. And it's shameful to see, some of these things that you shared and others on his pursuit to help humanity, to create freedom of expression and thought, and really to move the human race forward from my very strong perspective. So I appreciate
Well,
you
what's
sharing that.
interesting, another interesting thing about it, since we're on the topic of Musk and we were talking about capitalistic societies, is that sometimes people will say, well, he's just greedy, just wants more money. That actually might be true. There's obviously selfish pursuits here, obviously. But in this case, the reason I think, part of the reason that free markets and capitalism are so powerful is because our interests align. If Elon Musk can go into these hurricane type situations and provide communication efforts for recovery and reconnaissance and helping these individuals out, and he happens to make money at the same time, well, fine, so be it. I'm all for it. People often say with my movement, because we work with men and we're trying to improve their mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health, that I should just be doing it, quote unquote, out of the goodness of my heart. Well, I am. And also, I want to make as much money as I possibly can, because it's that money. It's the exchange of value. Again, if it wasn't money, it would be a skill set, or it'd be a service that I need, or crops and food and resources that I desire. But in this case, it's money because it helps exchange. That there's nothing wrong with that, because now I can take that value, that money, and I can redeploy it to other business ventures. I can give to charities. I know Bedros and you are huge on giving back to communities. That's only possible because you're making a boatload of money doing something that is really good for a lot of people. And they are determining, not you, not me, not anybody else sitting on the sidelines. The people buying the product are the ones determining that it is valuable. When it comes to your franchises, for example, I'm sure you've had some franchises rise to the top, others fall behind, maybe even close some. That is, look, you got to do everything you can to make sure those franchises don't fall behind, and the ones that you are doing well, you learn from, but you don't get to decide that. The market does. And those people who've lost franchises, assuming that's happened, deserve that. They didn't do good enough. And so do better, learn, grow, figure out what's going on, and put something into the market that people are actually interested in.
Yeah, amen, Ryan. And I always look at the word efficiency in replace of profitability, because profitability has gotten a weird, bad name recently, which is just insanity to me. I look at profitability as efficiency. Every single business, every single person needs to run a profit. It needs to be efficient. And going back to producing more than you consume, and what I love about free market capitalism, you have to add value first. And when you add value first and then most, only then can you get returned. And there's nothing wrong with profit whatsoever. It actually drives innovation, it drives efficiency, and it drives humanity forward. So very much
Well,
aligned there.
I think part of the issue is it's money. Money changes people and it makes people think weird things because it's just this little piece of paper and people don't really know what it represents. But if I were to go back, let's say 300 years, and you and I were living in the same vicinity, and you had some cattle, let's say, that you wanted to fence in because you wanted to secure them and you didn't want them to run away, and I happen to know how to uh, take down trees and build the lumber and then build the fence. And I came to you and I said, hey, if you want to fence in these cattle, I can go ahead and do that. You don't know how to do it. I do. In exchange, I'd like to have one of those cows for the year to provide food for me and my family. Now, if I could secure two cows instead of the one, nobody would bat an eye at that. They'd be like, oh, that was good. Good for him for doing that. But then but you start interjecting money, now all of a sudden people are like, oh, he's greedy. No, he's exchanging value. It's agreement between two responsible adults that can make their own decisions. And if you got ripped off, that's on you. If I got ripped off, that's on me.
It's a
There,
voluntary agreement, a voluntary agreement.
exactly. It's People don't understand what money is. Money is just it's a metric of value. That's all it is. If people
Yeah, tool
understood one thing
exchange.
about the markets, it's just a metric of value. And the more money you have, the more perceived value that you've given to other people. That's all it is. It's nothing more, nothing less.
Boom, mic drop. Man, you fire me up. And, as a free market capitalist, as a franchisor, as a supporter of small business, I mean, you are speaking the truth and this message needs to be heard. So I appreciate that, you, my friend.
Absolutely.
All right, Ryan. My last topic of conversation is really around leadership, because the pillars of the show are to teach leadership, promote capitalism, defend free speech. In Order of Man, you teach men how to lead in their families, in their communities, where leadership is a main focus and a pillar of the show. So from your perspective, what are some key leadership traits every man should develop?
Well, I think the first at the foundation of what it means to lead is to serve. It's a lot of times when we think of being a leader, we think about the plaque on the desk or the name on the wall or the corner office or the title or even the money that comes with that role. And while all that may happen, at its core, at its foundation, is the desire and ability to serve. The best definition I've ever heard of leadership is the ability to take somebody to a place that they could not have imagined going on their own. That's the best definition I ever heard of leadership. I love that because it doesn't really get down necessarily into the skills, but at a 30,000-foot view, it's your job to help people get where they need to go. For example, let me give you an example of leadership that you might not immediately recognize. So the other day, my 16-year-old son, he works out with a friend. We have a home gym. We've got a big squat rack and everything and in the garage. And him and his buddy have been out there for months, and they've been working hard and getting big and lifting and everything else. And my son's a power lifter, so he's got the technique down really well. And he has gotten so good that he has outgrown the amount of weight that I have available to him. He did a 400.
Nice.
He's 16 years old. Did a 405-pound deadlift the other day.
Woo.
He did a PR, a 385-pound back squat PR just 2 days ago. And he's like, "Dad, what do I do now? We don't have any more weight." Here's leadership. I got on the website today. Sorenex's, I use Sorenex quite a bit. They're good friends of mine. So I got on the website today and I said, all right, 200 more pounds. And I ordered 200 pounds of weight. It cost me, I don't know, $380 or something, $400, something like that. That's leadership. I am paving the way for him to do. He outlifts me. Those are lifts I can't hit myself. He's stronger than I am at this point, except for upper body. So I can't lead him by doing more than him anymore. But what I can do is I can pave the way. I can create opportunities. And as a father in that leadership role, it's my job to do that. Imagine if I said, well, sorry, I guess you're not getting any better. And yet people do that. It's like, well, I don't know. Just throw up their hands. No, go buy some more weights. Get them a gym membership. Like figure something out so that your people, in this case, my son, can continue to advance much further than I'm even capable of at this point. If that isn't a great example of what it means to lead, even in the absence of the actual skill set, I don't know what is.
I mean, it's a perfect example. As a leader, you are a guide. And, Ryan, to your credit, you provide an example in that moment of time to get him to break through to another level. My initial thought when you were kind of laying this out is even before that story to where he is, even at that moment in time, that was strong leadership by you to be able to blaze that path so he could even be in a state where he's progressing and developing and getting stronger. And then for you to take him and guide him to the next degree, I mean, that is leadership. Now, I believe there's a very big void in leadership right now. You can see this in people's physicality. 80% of our population is either statistically obese, overweight, which means there's a void of self-leadership. You can see this emotionally. You just flip on social media and everything's controversial. I saw you do a video the other day. It's like, hey, I'm driving. It's a blue sky. Wait, can I even say it's a blue sky right now? Because that's going to be controversial. And I was like, dude, that is exactly it. There is a void of self-leadership. You can see it, again, physically, emotionally. If someone's listening or watching this and, and they're thinking to themselves, you know what, I'm meant for something more. I want to start a business. I want to, create a fitness program that can impact people's life. I want to start a Fit Body Boot Camp or fill in the blank, whatever it is. But they know there's a void in leadership. They need to level up so that way they can be a better leader for themselves, for their family, and then eventually for their team and their business and their community. What would be a couple strategies they need to focus on to level up their self-leadership?
So you really only need two things to be successful in any venture in life. And I know this is broad and it's 30,000-foot view, but the two things are this: framework and network. If you can get that right, you will win. So when it comes to let's say you're 60 pounds overweight. You've been sitting on the couch for the last couple of years. You haven't been real active. Your wife's kind of noticing. You're feeling kind of, crappy about yourself. Physically, you look in the mirror and you're thinking, man, is this all I have to offer? So you're just down on yourself. You need two things. You need a framework. So the first framework might be maybe it's jumping on YouTube and typing in beginner workouts for losing 50 pounds. That's a framework. You're going to find a million videos on how to do that. And so that's a good system to follow. If you just follow that, you'll have success. Maybe it's, hey, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to hire a trainer and I'm going to work with a trainer 3 days a week. That's a system. That's a framework. Now, the trainer one also has a little bit of a component of the next feature, which is the network. You have to have other people in your life. So if it comes down to a trainer, for example, you have to have that trainer because they've gone through it. They've coached other people through it, and they'll help you navigate the landmines that come up as you inevitably progress down this path. Maybe it's accountability. I've got guys that I call and we talk with every single week. I have a set phone call every single week. We have agendas, we have ideas, we have topics, we have questions, things that we're going to discuss. And every week we get on the phone and we hash these things out. What's keeping you up? What's working well? Where are you struggling? And we all share these things. If I had a guy call me the other day and he said, hey man, I made a mistake. I need to talk with you. I said, great, let's get on the phone. We got on the phone. He shared what he was going through and we worked through it together. But you need to have good people in your corner, preferably people who have gone to a place where you're trying to go now, because they've already navigated and they're just going to turn around and say, watch out for this, step here, jump there, run, slow down. They're going to help you navigate that course. And then the last component, again, to go back to the frameworks, is just having good systems in place. I'm very aware of in my life what deters me. I have a natural propensity to be lazy at times. And so if I come into the office, which is where I'm at right now, and I don't have a plan, I'll revert to dinking around, to procrastinating, to finding all sorts of bullshit to do that doesn't actually move the needle. But I wake up and I have a plan. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know when I'm going to do it. I know what phone calls I need to make. I know who I need to make them to. I know what's in my bank account. I know what I want my bank account to grow to. I'm ready for a podcast like this today. I have a plan, and that reduces the likelihood of me stepping away. Another example that I often run into, again, to go back to working out, I know, again, because I'm lazy and kind of weak sometimes, is that if I don't have everything ready to go, I can very easily talk myself out of going to the gym in the morning. If I don't know what my workout is, I don't want to look. I'll figure it out later. I'll do it this afternoon. I'll never do it in the afternoon. If I don't have my clothes laid out, if I don't have my pre-workout, if I don't know where I'm going, when I'm going, if the car is out of gas, I'll use absolutely every possible excuse I can to not go to the gym in the morning. I know that. So the night before, I'm already planning out the next day. I've got my stuff out, my pre-workout's ready to go. I know what the workout is. I've got gas in the tank. Everything is ready. And that also helps me combat against my natural desire to be lazy and pathetic quite often.
Yeah, I love that. And a leadership framework that I always say is the separation is in the preparation. If you want to separate yourself to be a better leader, be a better man, be a better change maker, you need to focus on the preparation. That served me well in really putting in my words what you just laid down so eloquently. Friends, if you didn't hear that, this is something I just picked up about leadership as well. I actually love that quote unquote framework, which is leadership is framework and your network. And you combine those two, that's rocket fuel. So I love that. I'm going to take that with me in my leadership. So I appreciate you, my friend. Ryan, man, this has been absolutely incredible. I could talk to you for hours. I mean, kindred spirits, tons of value you produced. The last question I have for you, and as you can see over my shoulder, the name of my podcast is the CEO Show, the Chief Executive Officer Show. So to finish us out today, Ryan, what does it mean to be a CEO to you?
Obviously, when we talk about that, we most often think about it in the boardroom, right? And obviously it applies there. But I've often thought about, why is it so hard to do the same thing in your own personal life? Men do this really well. We're primarily good in two realms of our lives, or at least we try to be, and it's the physical realm, so our physical condition, and then our financial realm. Like those are the two realms that we focus on. And we bring in the right people and we have the systems and we invest in these things and we do all the right things. We try to improve our own abilities. We track and we measure our progress. We see where we're falling behind. But where we don't do that is we don't do it with our spirituality and we don't do it with our relationships, our personal relationships, your wife, your children, friends. I was talking with a friend this morning about it, and I wish for myself and everybody else that we could be that CEO that we are in business, also at home. Like, how do you show up powerfully? What resources are you investing in for your family, for yourself, for your own spiritual journey? What metrics are you tracking? How do you measure, for example, being a better dad today than you were before? Is it more time with your kids? Is it more quality time? Is it coaching your kids' teams? Is it going on a vacation together? Those are all good ways to track it, but it's something that most men don't even consider or think about. The kids get the leftovers, their wife gets the leftovers. How do you know you're in a good relationship? Is it intimacy? Is it quality time and talks? Is it the amount of sex you're having? I don't know what the metric is, but do you? Like, are you really aware of what you ought to be tracking so that you can improve in the departments of life that are important to you? And I think that's what a CEO does. A CEO knows what he wants in all realms. A CEO knows where he's good, where he's weak, what metrics he needs to track, and then he's actively working on either doing it himself or plugging in the holes and the gaps in order to make sure those things get accomplished. And that applies in the personal, in your personal life, in your house, just as well as it does in the boardroom.
Amen to that. Whether you're the CEO of your business or the CEO of your life, which everyone listening to this or watching this is, wise wisdom words from my dude, Ryan Michler. Ryan, man, this has been absolutely incredible. I appreciate you, your time for being on today. In the small chance my audience hasn't connected with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, orderofman.com. We just launched a new website. We've got all of our stuff going on there. We've got our exclusive brotherhood, the Iron Council, that should be opening fairly quickly around the time that I think this conversation is going to be released. You can check that out at orderofman.com/Iron Council. And then outside of that, at Ryan Michler on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, wherever you're doing your social media stuff, I'm there.
Heck yeah. Well, we'll put on that show notes. I follow you in all those places with the exception of Twitter, so I'll add that to the arsenal. Ryan,
Yeah,
man,
that one's kind of a mess at times. So, I'm not totally active on there, but it is funny if I have a spare minute or two to see people who are just pissed off about nothing and everything. That's a good place to go for that. It seems like.
well, you and me both, actually, on that note. But my friend, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a long time coming. We had to, because of me, adjust a few times. But when I first got connected, I knew this is going to be a slam dunk home run. It certainly was. So I want to thank you for being on your show, on my show today. But more importantly, my friend, thank you for being a trailblazer. Thank you for being a leader. Thank you for being a man that your and our society needs right now in such a volatile and such a very challenging time. You are doing great things, and certainly you have an ally in me, and I just want to acknowledge not only that, but acknowledge you. So thank you so much for all that you do, my friend.
Thank you, man. It means a lot to me.
All right, friends, I know you got a ton of value from this episode. My one humble ask, assuming you got value, drop your biggest comment or your takeaway in the comments. That way we can start a healthy, engaging conversation. On that note, remember, my friends, adversity is your advantage, and we'll see you in the next episode.